Welcome, everyone, to another deep dive.
We have a really fascinating one for you today.
We really do. But before we even set the stage for the material we're covering today, do me a massive favor. Hit that like button right now, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the show.
It really just takes a second of your time.
Yeah, just a second, and it fundamentally helps us continue to bring you these exhaustive, you know, really nuanced explorations of the culture's most compelling texts. And trust me, you are going to want to give this particular deep dive your full, undivided attention.
Oh, absolutely.
Today, we are unpacking an intensely provocative, completely audacious new ebook that has been making some serious waves. It's titled Women Live for Free, Men Pay the Ultimate Price, and it's written by Connie Riker.
And right off the bat, the author herself frames this as a matriarchal manifesto.
Exactly, a matriarchal manifesto. Essentially, it acts as a highly detailed, methodical blueprint for taking the societal structures we currently just accept as normal and flipping them entirely upside down.
It is a text that truly leaves no stone unturned. And its thought experiments are really designed to push the reader right to the edge of their comfort zone.
Yeah, right to the edge.
But before we dive into the mechanics of the world Riker has built, we need to establish some critical context for you, the listener. This book contains themes that are highly politically charged.
Very charged.
It is extreme.
Yeah.
And it leans heavily into a very specific radical ideology.
Yeah, to give you an idea of the intended demographic, the text seems explicitly written for a female supremacist feminist audience. And the author really leans into this idea of an audience who are possessed by their negative animus.
Right, and she positions this movement as being allied with cultural Marxists with the explicit goal of attacking masculinity and Western civilization itself.
Exactly. So we need to make it absolutely crystal clear right at the top of the show. We are not taking sides today.
No, we are not. That cannot be overstated.
We are not here to endorse the viewpoints presented in this text, and we are not here to condemn them either. Our role today is strictly to serve as your impartial guides through a very complex piece of media.
And it's worth noting, the author mentions in her own disclaimer that this work operates as edutainment.
Edutainment, right.
Yeah, it's a piece of satirical, hyper-exaggerated speculative writing meant to provoke thought, shock the senses, and force us to look at modern power dynamics through a distorted funhouse mirror.
So we are strictly here to analyze the architecture of that satire. We're going to break down the world building, extract the core themes, and just examine the cultural anxieties the author is playing with.
And the world she constructs is remarkably intricate. I mean, the satire functions because it takes kernels of real, observable societal tensions and extrapolates them to their most absurd logical extremes.
Right, she isn't just throwing wild ideas at a wall.
No, she is building a comprehensive alternate reality. It has its own economy, its own legal system, and its own underlying philosophy.
To give you an immediate sense of what we're dealing with here, just imagine an alternate reality where a man walks into a coffee shop and is charged a 300% markup on his morning latte.
Just for possessing a Y chromosome.
Right, simply for having a Y chromosome. Or picture a world where the tiers of male executives are literally traded as a high-value liquid currency by Wall Street hedge funds.
It's wild.
Or imagine a society where the basic biological function of breathing oxygen incurs an auto-renewing monthly subscription fee.
Just for breathing.
Yeah. So if the sheer audacity of those concepts fascinates you, shocks you, or even just intrigues you on a purely intellectual level, I can almost guarantee you will want to buy this book by the time we wrap up this deep dive. Let's start at the foundation, though. How does the author set the philosophical stage for this universe?
Well, the foundation is laid out right in the preface, and it requires a complete paradigm shift from the reader. Riker immediately and systematically obliterates any traditional mainstream notions of gender equality.
She does not hold back.
Not at all. She doesn't argue for a level playing field. In fact, the text explicitly dismisses the very concept of equality as a scam.
A scam, right, like a manipulative construct.
Exactly, a manipulative construct invented by men historically to hoard power while giving the illusion of fairness. She essentially tells her audience that if they're picking up this book hoping for a manual on how to share power amicably, they should just close it immediately.
Yeah, this is not a text about leaning in.
Or breaking glass ceilings, no.
Yeah.
It is a text that advocates for unapologetic domination. It outlines the complete systemic extraction of male wealth, male labor, and male dignity.
It's a very aggressive framing. She actually refers to this overarching project as a Gnostic war on male matter. Now, for those listening who might be a little rusty on early Christian theology or ancient philosophy, let's unpack that specific terminology for a second.
Yeah, it's a really deep cut.
It is. In historical Gnosticism, there was this fundamental belief that the material world, meaning the physical flesh, the earth, was inherently flawed, corrupt, or even evil, while the spiritual realm was pure.
So by explicitly calling this a Gnostic war on male matter, Riker is applying an ancient, heavily theological concept directly to human biology.
She is taking the concept of the corrupt material world and localizing it entirely within the male body. In the reality of the book, male biology isn't just viewed as culturally problematic, it is treated as a literal spiritual pollutant.
It's a biological hazard that must be contained, purged, and ultimately subjugated by the pure spiritual force of the matriarchy.
Which is a fascinating way to build a universe.
It really is, because this framing allows the author to logically justify the extreme measures taken in the rest of the book. If you classify something as a toxic biohazard, you don't negotiate with it. You manage it through quarantine and extraction.
And we see that management strategy applied immediately to the corporate sector. The book provides a detailed look at how this philosophy filters down into office culture and corporate restructuring.
Well, the corporate stuff is incredibly sharp.
There's this specific anecdote in the text about a trendy tech startup that initiates a sweeping ergonomic overhaul. They completely ban standard black computer keyboards.
Which sounds absurd until you read the rationale.
Right. The rationale provided by the HR department in the book is that traditional black keyboards are aggressively phallic in their design and energy.
Aggressively foul.
Yeah, so the male coders are mandated to use pink astrologic keyboards instead.
Which is a very pointed critique of how corporate wellness initiatives often function in the real world. Think about the modern workplace and the endless push for ergonomic chairs, standing desks, and holistic office environments.
See it everywhere now.
We do. And Riker takes that reality and injects it with a radical gender ideology. When you read that section, it's clear she is satirizing the micromanagement of employee environments. But I would argue there's an even deeper layer here. It's a direct inversion of the historical pink tax.
Oh, that's a really interesting angle. The real world phenomenon where products marketed to women like razors or shampoo cost more simply because they are pink.
Precisely. But here, the pink tax isn't a financial burden placed on women. It is an aesthetic and psychological burden placed on men. The text actually mentions a male employee who complains about the new astrologic keyboard.
And how does management handle that?
Well, instead of having a dialogue management, immediately demotes him and forces him to report to a female junior associate, citing that his masculinity isn't just toxic, it's ergonomic.
Wow, toxic ergonomics.
It highlights how, in this fictional universe, even the kinetic physical act of typing is policed to ensure it doesn't harbor any lingering patriarchal aggression.
It's a complete policing of space and behavior, and it escalates pretty dramatically from keyboards to actual biological intervention. Let's talk about the pharmaceutical industry in the book, specifically the section detailing Pfizer's masculinity detox program.
This part is so vivid.
It is far beyond your standard corporate diversity and inclusion seminar. In this reality, male employees are required to undergo a brutal physical and psychological regimen. They are forced to hike barefoot through patches of poison ivy.
And the book describes the poison ivy as nature's exfoliant for fragile male egos.
Nature's exfoliant. And while they are enduring this physical discomfort, they have to recite Sylvia Plath's novel, The Bell Jar, backward. The stated corporate goal is to purge their internalized patriarch.
It's an almost surreal image. The barefoot hike through poison ivy operates as a modernized corporate version of a medieval pilgrimage or a penance ritual. It's self-flagellation rebranded as professional development.
And the requirement to recite the bell jar backward is a fascinating detail.
It really is, because the bell jar is a seminal text exploring female mental health, societal expectations, and the suffocating nature of patriarchy. So reciting it backward implies that men cannot simply read, understand female pain. They must deconstruct it, reverse it, and internalize the structural complexity of it while in a state of physical suffering.
Only then can they achieve this masculinity detox. You mentioned earlier how the book treats male biology as a biohazard, and that is explicitly evident in how the corporate world handles testosterone.
It's not viewed as a naturally occurring hormone.
No, it is treated as an endocrine disruptor that threatens the peace of the workspace. The text claims that the mere act of a man laughing releases hazardous masculine energy. To combat this, enlightened companies in the book mandate a practice called silent clapping.
The author describes this as jazz hands dipped in Xanax.
Jazz hands dipped in Xanax. The author is obviously poking fun at the very real trend of sanitizing corporate environments where any display of intense emotion or aggression is heavily penalized.
Right. By mandating silent clapping, the corporation is effectively neutering the physical expression of male approval or excitement. And the purported success of this Pfizer detox program is chillingly specific. The author boasts that post-detox, 91% of the male alumni now sob openly during board meetings.
Which transitions perfectly into what might be the most brilliant satirical metric in the entire book. Forget return on investment or traditional profit margins. The new key performance indicator on Wall Street is CPM.
Cries per minute.
Cries per minute. In this alternate reality, financial publications like Forbes are running cover stories with titles like Why Crying C-Suites Outperform. Male pharmaceutical representatives are forced to wear estrogen patches on their tailored suits, almost like modern-day scarlet letters, just to atone for their underlying biology.
I want to linger on the CPM metric for a moment because it is doing a lot of heavy lifting rhetorically. In the real world, there has been a massive push over the last decade for leaders to be more authentic, to show vulnerability, and to lead with empathy.
Yeah, we are constantly told that leaders who show emotion are more effective.
Exactly. And Riker takes that genuine cultural shift towards emotional intelligence and weaponizes it. She transforms vulnerability from a positive trait into a strict quota. If a man isn't crying enough, he isn't hitting his CPM targets, which means he is retaining toxic stoicism. It commodifies the act of breaking down.
It totally commodifies it. And what happens if a man slips up? Say a man in a meeting actually expresses a firm traditional opinion. The women in the office are equipped with the Detox Your Desk starter pack.
It's essentially a chemical weapon against male ambition.
It really is. You spray lavender to erase his ambition, peppermint to cool his sudden male rage, and bergamot, which the book notes is included simply because it sounds like beta male, to neutralize him. They spray these essential oils like Lysol on any man who dares to speak up out of turn.
It reduces interpersonal conflict to pest control. You aren't debating a male colleague, you are fumigating him. It is a total invalidation of male agency within the professional sphere, paving the way for the economic exploitation that dominates the next section of the manifesto.
Yes, the economic exploitation. The text moves from the boardroom to the consumer market, introducing a concept the author calls hypergamy's holy spreadsheet.
Now, hypergamy traditionally refers to the practice of marrying up the social or economic ladder, but Riker redefines it entirely.
Here, it is not about marrying into wealth. It is about extracting wealth through a practice of systemic financial domination, or findom. And crucially, this extraction isn't framed as greed. It is framed as cosmic justice. It is presented as a moral imperative for women to drain men's wallets.
The author is taking the language of social justice reparations and therapy and applying it to ruthless, microtransactional capitalism. The book provides several highly specific satirical data points to illustrate how this works in practice.
My favorite example is the story of Jessica, a student at UCLA. According to the text, Jessica launched a crowdfunding campaign to process her trauma.
And the traumatic event was.
She briefly dated a man who chewed his food too loudly. That was it. But she utilized all the correct therapy speak. She claimed his mastication was an assault on her sensory boundaries and a microaggression against her peace.
And the result?
She raised $47,000 from sympathetic, guilt-ridden men online, and she didn't use it for therapy. She took that $47,000 and bought a Tesla.
You might read that and think it's just a critique of GoFundMe culture, but it's more specific than that. Riker is satirizing the inflation of victimhood. We live in a society where the language of severe psychological trauma is increasingly applied to minor everyday discomforts.
Right, like loud chewing.
Exactly. By having Jessica successfully monetize the annoyance of loud chewing to the tune of a luxury vehicle, the book creates a world where men are viewed as walking liabilities. Any minor inconvenience caused by a man is treated as a taxable offense.
Extracting that wealth is not seen as manipulative. It is viewed as restoring moral equilibrium to the universe. And the primary vehicle for this everyday extraction is Venmo.
The app becomes a literal weapon of mass wealth redistribution.
The book cites a fictionalized statistic claiming that 75% of Venmo payments from men to women in the society include groveling, deeply apologetic notes. You don't just pay for your half of the dinner, you transfer funds with notes like, "For your peace, queen," or Sorry, I breathe in your direction.
The men in this reality have completely internalized their role as human APMs. They are paying an ongoing subscription fee for the right to occupy space near women.
Let's analyze the public nature of Venmo here. Venmo isn't just a bank transfer, it's a social media feed. Everyone can see who you are paying and what you are writing.
That's a great point. Historically, public penance involved being put in the stocks in the town square so everyone could witness your shame. In Riker's world, the Venmo feed serves as the digital town square.
The groveling notes are a public performance of submission. The men are purchasing digital indulgences to prove to the community that they are appropriately subservient.
And the digital economy extends even further into the realm of cryptocurrency and Web3. The book highlights a fictional podcast called Cash and Clout. The hosts of this podcast teach women how to take unsolicited nude photos sent by their ex-boyfriends and mint them into crypto art.
They rebrand these photos as patriarchy dividends.
It is a brilliant inversion of digital revenge. In the real world, the non-consensual sharing of intimate images, revenge porn, is a massive issue that disproportionately targets and harms women. Riker flips the script entirely.
In her reality, the unsolicited male image is seized, commodified, and sold on the blockchain. The book mentions one specific listener of the podcast who minted an NFT collection of her ex's photos and titled it Penis Envy 2.0. The entire collection sold out in 6 minutes.
It is monetized, misandrogynery, wrapped in a veneer of girl boss empowerment. Which brings us perfectly to the concept of the matriarchal surcharge in physical retail spaces.
This is where the economic theory of the book hits the pavement. The text describes a cafe in Seattle that makes a radical pricing decision. They impose a mandatory 300% markup on any customer who happens to have a Y chromosome.
And just to rub it in, the overpriced drinks are served to the men in mugs that proudly display patriarchy foam art.
Now, any basic understanding of economics would tell you that a business doing this would instantly bankrupt itself. You would alienate half your customer base and openly mock them. But in the reality, Riker has constructed the cafe's revenue doesn't drop, it actually triples in a single month.
So we have to ask ourselves why. Why would men willingly participate in this? It isn't just about female revenge, it is about male complicity.
The book posits that men literally line up around the block to pay these absurd surcharges because they are driven by a deep-seated, agonizing sense of historical guilt. They are desperate for validation.
By paying the 300% markup, they are purchasing a fleeting moment of moral absolution. The women in the cafe aren't just paying for coffee, they are paying for the theatrical spectacle of watching men grovel and willingly submit to economic punishment.
And the cherry on top of this Seattle cafe scenario is the peer-reviewed study that follows. A study which the book notes was entirely funded by the cafe's new surplus profits finds that men who willingly pay the 300% surcharge receive 73% more matches on Tinder.
The author asks the reader directly, is this a coincidence? Or is it proof that women on dating apps can smell male desperation like sharks smell blood in the water?
It weaponizes the dating market to enforce these economic penalties. If a man wants to participate in romantic or physical intimacy, he must first prove his willingness to be financially drained.
It establishes an airtight logical loop, where resisting the financial domination ensures you will be genetically and socially isolated.
It is the ultimate commodification of guilt. And this financial ledger doesn't just apply to consumer goods and dating, it applies to the very fabric of family and memory. The text continually reinforces the concept of an infinite invoice of emotional labor.
We need to look at how this plays out in the legal system regarding the double binds and emotional debt.
There is an incredibly dark, hilarious story in the book about a man who is taken to civil court by his own sister. She sues him for $1.2 million. The charge is childhood emotional theft.
And what was the specific crime that warrants a $1.2 million lawsuit?
He forgot her birthday back in 1997. That's it. The court rules in the sister's favor, establishing a legal precedent that every time a man forgets a woman's existence or fails to prioritize her emotional needs, he is actively stealing her future happiness and she's entitled to retroactive financial compensation.
The author is taking the sociological concept of emotional labor and pushing it to its absolute breaking point. In reality, emotional labor refers to the very real, often invisible and unpaid work usually expected of women to manage relationships, remember birthdays, organize holidays, and soothe feelings.
It is a vital conversation to have.
Yes, but Riker literalizes this concept. She transforms the invisible mental load into a hard, inescapable financial ledger. You don't just owe an apology for forgetting a birthday, You owe a calculated sum with compound interest dating back decades.
The technology sector in the book responds to this new legal framework by inventing the Male Debt Tracker app. This app operates in the background of daily life, automatically billing men for instances of emotional negligence.
So the dystopian credit score.
Exactly. There is a character, a college student named Chad, who manages to rack up $12,000 in debt on the app in a single semester. And if you look at the itemized invoice for his debt, the primary charge is listed as existing in lecture halls while mediocre.
Let's unpack the philosophy behind that specific charge. Existing in lecture halls while mediocre, Riker is tapping into the cultural discourse surrounding male entitlement and spatial awareness.
The idea that mediocre men confidently take up physical and intellectual space speaking over more qualified women.
Right, it's a common critique in academic and corporate settings, but the app quantifies that spatial and intellectual entitlement. It dictates that if a man is not providing exceptional value to the space, his mere existence is a drain on the environment, and he must pay a tax for the privilege of occupying that room.
Chad's mother ends up having to Venmo the university dean directly to clear his debt. It paints an incredibly bleak, inescapable trap for men. You are fined simply for being average.
And this conditional value extends beyond behavior right down to physical decay. The book frames male aging, illness, and physical vulnerability not as a natural human process, but as a direct financial liability imposed on women.
This leads to one of the most staggering satirical court cases in the entire manifesto. A man in California is undergoing chemotherapy. He loses his hair. His ex-wife takes him to court, and the judge orders the bald chemotherapy patient to pay his ex-wife $4,500 every single month.
And the legal reasoning cited by the judge is to compensate the ex-wife for the loss of his aesthetic capital.
In the reality of this book, 72% of women believe that men owe them financial compensation simply for the act of aging. A man's receding hairline isn't just a sign of getting older, it is treated as a crime scene.
Getting a terminal illness is considered a hostile act of patriarchal terrorism because it forces women to deal with the inconvenience of a defective male body.
It highlights this terrifying, purely conditional value placed on human life. A man is only allowed to exist so long as he is aesthetically pleasing and financially solvent. The moment his body breaks down, he is financially penalized for the burden he places on the matriarchy.
To enforce a system this objectively absurd and cruel a society would have to completely dismantle its relationship with truth. You cannot have objective facts in a system that relies entirely on subjective emotional ledgers.
And Riker understands this perfectly. That is why the next major phase of her blueprint involves what she calls rationality's funeral. She systematically attacks the traditional pillars of society: objective truth, empirical data, and recorded history.
This part of the book is an absolute mindbender. Riker describes how academia is overhauled to reflect this new reality. At MIT, the administration introduces a required course called feminist calculus.
In this new mathematical framework, the equation 2 plus 2 does not equal 4, 2 plus 2 equals oppression. The rigid empirical nature of traditional numbers is scrapped entirely. It is replaced by a curriculum focused on interpretive movement and tracking the lunar cycles of the student body.
It is a sharp-cutting satire of ideological capture within the university system. The author is critiquing the postmodern idea that objective reality is merely a construct created by those in power.
By framing basic addition and subtraction as colonialist math, that is, quoting the book Allergic to Magic, the author portrays a society that has purposefully unmoored itself from reality.
In this world, the correct answer to a math problem is simply whatever validates the feelings of the women in the room.
And if you challenge that system, the consequences are swift. A male student in the MIT class raises his hand during midterms to genuinely question how derivatives function under the rules of feminist calculus. The professor immediately fails him for toxic numeracy.
Toxic numeracy.
Yeah, and his academic punishment isn't just a failing grade. He is forced to write handwritten apology letters to every single woman who has ever taken a selfie at the Anne Frank house.
It's a collision of mathematical logic and performative historical guilt. And history itself gets the exact same reconstructive treatment as mathematics. The book advocates for burning maps, burning history books, and entirely renaming scientific foundations.
The strategy is explicitly defined in the text as strategic institutional gaslighting. Riker writes, "Truth isn't a rigid chart, it's a fading sky."
We see this play out in the cultural consciousness of the youth. The book points to fictional Gen Z TikTok polls showing that 67% of young women now firmly believe that Marie Curie invented gravity.
And why does she invent it? Purely to spite her cheating husband.
Yeah.
As for Sir Isaac Newton, the new curriculum teaches that he was just a colonialist hack who plagiarized his way into history.
Albert Einstein is reduced to an incel who purposefully weaponized time zones just to control women's bathroom breaks.
It is all in service of erasing what the author calls the myth of male genius. The foundational elements of science are rebranded to strip men of any historical credit. The periodic table of elements is completely rewritten.
Lead is officially renamed Gloria Steinium. Uranium becomes Riot Girl 235.
And helium is renamed Hephaestus with the justification that men's voices naturally do not deserve to be heard at higher commanding pitches.
If a man attempts to push back against this new reality by citing peer-reviewed data or historical archives, the book's official praxis instructs women to simply scream acronyms at him until campus security drags him out of the room.
Once he is removed, the women are encouraged to republish his research under their own names, utilizing pastel infographics. It's a total reshaping of reality, where facts themselves are flagged as unreliable by default because they were compiled under a patriarchal system.
So if the matriarchy controls the economy, the legal system, mathematics, and history, where does this ultimate control lead?
The logical endpoint of this ideology, the final frontier of control, is biology itself. The text inevitably moves from reshaping society to reshaping the human genome, initiating an era of biological warfare, and enforcing what Riker calls the fundamental debt of existence.
This is where the world building shifts from corporate satire to dystopian sci-fi.
The author introduces data from fertility clinics in Malmö, Sweden. These clinics are reporting a massive 94% drop in male births across the region. And it is not a statistical anomaly or an environmental accident. It is entirely by design.
The drop is attributed to a newly developed artificial intelligence called Lilith's filter. This technology is utilized during the in vitro fertilization process, and it literally scrubs sperm samples of Y chromosomes.
The book describes the AI wiping away the male chromosome like bleach, removing a stubborn stain from fabric.
Naturally, the few remaining men in society try to protest this. They call it eugenics. They call it a deliberate biological cleansing.
But the author's narrative voice dismisses these concerns with chilling indifference. She labels the eradication of male fetuses as universal balance and accelerated evolution. The book poses a rhetorical question to the reader: why go through the exhausting labor of raising future oppressors when technology allows you to engineer a world where daughters inherit the earth by default?
The author frames the Y chromosome not as a vital component of human reproduction, but as a biological typo, a genetic error that causes aggression and systemic inequality. Therefore, the filtering out of male embryos is casually referred to as feminist proofreading.
But for the minority of men who are permitted to be born into this new world, their existence is immediately and ruthlessly commodified from the moment they take their first breath.
Which introduces the ultimate inescapable tax of this universe, the womb privilege fee.
You don't just get to be born. A hospital in New Jersey implements a policy where fathers are charged a flat $50,000 fee right there in the delivery room the moment a male child is delivered.
The hospital administration labels this fee as necessary reparations for the violence of being born male.
There is a scene where a stunned father tries to protest the invoice, and the delivery nurses just laugh at him, telling him that if he didn't want to pay the penalty, he should have chosen a life of celibacy.
The concept of original sin is entirely mapped onto gender here. In Christian theology, humans are born with the burden of original sin and must spend their lives seeking redemption. In Riker's universe, being born male is the original sin.
Sweden takes it a step further than New Jersey, proposing a nationwide $10,000 sperm tax applied to every single male child to offset their future harm potential.
The legal logic dictating these policies is that male infancy is essentially an interest-free loan provided by feminism.
Men begin their lives with a credit score of misogyny that is already deep in negative equity. They are forced to spend their entire mortal existence groveling, paying fees, and apologizing just to build their credit up to a baseline of zero.
And the absolute wildest, most claustrophobic concept in the entire manifesto is how this debt applies to the basic autonomic function of breathing, existing while male is criminalized as an ecological disaster.
The book describes a mandatory piece of software called Patriarchy Prime. It is an app that automatically deducts $999 a month from a man's bank account. The charge is listed as oxygen privilege.
One woman in the book proudly brags on social media that she completely funded her entire IVF process, presumably using Lilith's filter by relying solely on her ex-boyfriend's backlogged breathing fees.
Riker brilliantly ties this absurd biological tax into modern, real-world climate anxieties. The environmental crisis is entirely blamed on male respiration.
The book details a legal framework enacted in New Zealand called the Male Carbon Levy.
Under this law, a divorced father is legally mandated to wear a biometric CO2 monitor strapped tightly to his chest at all hours of the day. The state has determined that his deep breathing accelerates climate change, so he is forced to pay his ex-wife daily oxygen fines as a new environmentally conscious form of alimony.
The text points out that 67% of Gen Z women eagerly support taxing men's oxygen consumption as a critical pillar of ecological justice.
The cultural enforcement of this is terrifyingly plausible. The book describes a viral TikTok trend called Pay for Your Pulse. Women walk around the city, film random men jogging in the park, and post the videos with captions like, "This jogger is currently stealing $12.50 worth of air from future matriarchs."
There is a specific anecdote about a college student who legally bills her own elderly father $500 every single month for patriarchal respiration.
She argues in court that his mere existence in the family home is suffocating feminist progress. It's the ultimate inescapable financial trap. You literally have to pay the matriarchy for the right to metabolize oxygen.
And as we move into the final sections of the manifesto, the scope expands even further. The dominance doesn't stop at biology and personal economics. Riker details a complete and total institutional takeover encompassing the spiritual, corporate, and military pillars of global society.
She envisions a world where traditional patriarchal religions are entirely usurped and replaced by a movement she categorizes as woke witchcraft.
Yes, the establishment of the matriarchal Bible. In this reality, the Vatican has completely capitulated. The Pope institutes a global feminist reformation program.
Traditional sacraments are overhauled. Nuns in the Catholic Church swap out the traditional Eucharist wafers for ceremonial abortion pills.
There is a vividly described scene where a newly ordained high priestess baptizes a newborn infant by reading abortion rights manifestos over the font.
And perhaps the most striking visual in the entire book, the city of Seattle erects a massive 10-foot glittering uterus altar in the center of the city.
The religious devotion to the divine feminine is absolute. The book notes that congregants worshiping at the Seattle uterus altar report suffering from spontaneous, debilitating migraines if they even accidentally glimpse a man with a beard walking past the sanctuary.
It's a brilliant, biting parody of how modern consumerism so eagerly co-opts spirituality and progressive aesthetics.
The consumerism aspect is huge. Target, the massive retail chain, capitalizes on the religious shift by stocking a satanic feminist rosary in the toy aisle.
The book notes that this rosary completely outperforms Lego sets in quarterly sales. Each individual bead on the rosary is molded into the shape of a fallopian tube, and the crucifix at the bottom is replaced by a gold-dipped wire coat hanger.
You also have women subscribing to Patreon tiers for $500 a month to receive Hex the CEO kits in the mail.
These kits include artisanal nail polish infused with patriarchy cursing glitter, which the women use while typing code designed to hack and crash their ex-boyfriend's crypto wallets.
Which perfectly transitions into the macroeconomic corporate grifting. The financial markets in Riker's world are explicitly weaponized along gender lines. The book introduces a fascinating financial instrument called the Bro-Down Index.
This part is hilarious. The Bro-Down Index allows investors to short stocks that are inherently tied to fragile male egos.
So we are talking about massive short positions against craft whiskey distilleries, monster truck rally promoters, and artisanal beard oil startups.
There's a story of a woman who makes a quick $2.3 million profit trading the index. How? A famous Elon Musk-type male tech billionaire tweets something mildly inappropriate and defensive. The moment the tweet goes live, the Bro-Down Index plummets.
Women across the globe liquidate their massive profits and use the capital to construct luxury co-working spaces where naturally they charge men triple the standard rate for oat milk lattes.
Wall Street firms lean into this by offering male sin ETFs, exchange-traded funds, that allow institutional investors to bet heavily against any industry that the culture decides men have ruined.
Furthermore, the concept of corporate accountability and legal liability is entirely replaced by a system of Lilithian pardons. The text claims that an astonishing 92% of Fortune 500 CEOs who are still men clinging to power quietly pay $10 million every single month in mandatory donations.
This $10 million fee buys them a Lilithian pardon, which grants a specialized PR firm the right to permanently scrub their numerous harassment lawsuits and toxic behavior from Wikipedia. As Riker dryly notes in the text, $10 million a month is cheaper than integrity.
It's reputation laundering operating at a global institutional scale. And finally, the ultimate enforcer of state power, the matriarchal military. Riker details a radical ground-up restructuring of the armed
For
forces.
instance, the military in Ukraine deploys an elite sniper unit known as the Botox Brigade. These are highly trained assassins who pass the time in the trenches by repurposing spent bullet casings as cuticle pushers and nail art tools.
They coat their sniper cartridges in hot pink glitter and post the photos to Instagram with the caption "Slay," literally.
The justification for this military overhaul is rooted in a fictional Pentagon study. The generals in this universe conclude that traditional male-led infantry platoons are deeply inefficient.
The study claims that male soldiers waste up to 40% more ammunition during combat because they are busy shooting at their own egos to prove their dominance to one another.
Consequently, four-star generals are stripped of their command and forced to attend mandatory Yassify Your Battle Plan workshops.
And who leads these workshops? 19-year-old female TikTok tacticians who prioritize aesthetics and emotional warfare over traditional ballistics.
The U.S. Army falls in line by launching the Menstrual Might Initiative. This policy requires all active duty male soldiers to carry tampons as part of their standard tactical gear.
The book notes this serves no medical purpose for the men. It is simply a poetic and forced reversal of historical patriarchal oppression.
And back on the domestic front, a woman named Karen from Ohio launches a viral petition to entirely abolish and replace local police departments. Her proposed replacement is estrogen enforcement squads.
Karen's underlying logic, as presented in the book, is flawless within the confines of this absurd reality. She argues why risk sending heavily armed, volatile men into a crisis situation when a perfectly timed, deeply condescending eye roll from a menopausal woman has the power to psychologically de-escalate any conflict.
But the absolute most brutal, terrifying policy has to be Canada's crybaby conscription law.
Under this new legislation, any Canadian man who takes to the internet to complain about fairness, reverse sexism, or the loss of his rights is immediately flagged by an algorithm and automatically drafted into the military.
But they aren't handed rifles. They are stripped of any glory or combat roles. They are sent to the absolute front lines of their own irrelevance, where they are ordered to scrub latrines with toothbrushes while being forced to recite the essays of Roxane Gay backward.
It is the ultimate inescapable state punishment for the crime of male fragility.
It is a relentless, exhausting, and brilliantly constructed gauntlet of satire. We've traced the blueprint from the pink ergonomic keyboards and corporate crying quotas, through the extraction of wealth via Venmo and emotional debt trackers, all the way to taxing oxygen and glitter bombing the military apparatus.
So having mapped out this entire matriarchal manifesto, the critical question remains, what is the final takeaway for the listener?
Right, what are we supposed to do with all of this?
If we peel back the extreme, often hilarious layers of this edutainment, if we strip away the hyper-exaggeration of uterus alters and oxygen finds, what's Connie Riker actually revealing to us? I think it leaves you with a deeply lingering, provocative thought.
It definitely forces you to look at things differently.
This book forces us to confront the very real, often unspoken modern anxieties surrounding gender relations today. It highlights the crushing weight of performative guilt in our culture, and it points a glaring spotlight on the literal commodification of emotional labor and vulnerability in late-stage capitalism.
The question for you to ponder is this: can this kind of extreme funhouse mirror exaggeration actually help us understand the very real power imbalances and resentment simmering in our society? Or does a text like this just pour gasoline on the fire, creating deeper ideological trenches and more division?
That is something you will have to mull over for yourself long after this audio finishes playing.
Wow. That tension right there, that lingering question, is exactly why we do this show. We love unpacking texts that challenge the baseline.
Absolutely.
If this deep dive hooked you, if you found yourself laughing, gasping, or just completely mesmerized by the sheer audacity and the meticulous logic of these thought experiments, you absolutely need to experience the full text for yourself.
Hearing us analyze it is one thing, but reading Riker's actual prose is an entirely different ride.
Go check out the ebook Women Lie for Free, Men Pay the Ultimate Price by Connie Riker. You can purchase and download it right now on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
I entirely agree. It is a text that demands to be read in its own words, so you can fully grasp the dense, claustrophobic scope of the world building we discussed today.
And if you want to keep up with the author and dive into more of her daily strategies and provocative thought experiments, make sure you follow her online. You can find her writing at Conrad Riker on Substack. You can follow her on Twitter at Conrad Riker and check out her video essays on YouTube at Conrad Riker.
Thank you so much for giving us your time and joining us on this deep dive.
Please, before you close the app, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we will see you on the next one.